Hi, I'm Daryl Davis, and you're listening to the Keynote Curators Podcast with Seth Dechtman.
So welcome everybody to today's version of the Curated Insights with Seth Dechtman. Our special, and I do mean special guest, is Daryl Davis. Daryl, welcome to Curated Insights.
Thank you, Seth. Thank you very much for having me.
You're very welcome. And why I underscore special, it's not every day that you meet a Black man, a Black African-American, who has broken bread, sat down with the KKK, been to their cross burnings and gotten to know them and become close friends with them, their family members, and their communities. So I'm just going to start right off, Daryl, in the deep end, if you don't mind. And, it would be kind of superficial to just know you by a Black man who is able to inculcate himself into the world of the KKK. It's a great marketing kind of hook, if you will, but it's much deeper than that. And, you hear your story, you read your story about a 10-year-old boy in Massachusetts who says, how can you hate me if you don't even know me? But let's take the other side of that. How can you love me if you don't even know me?
Well, this is very true. Love is based upon someone's trust in you, how you feel they may be benevolent to you. And so, you don't get to love anybody until you get to know them. Some people fall in love before they get to know someone, and
right.
we call that lust.
Right, or infatuation.
Infatuation, sure.
Right, because I think the key there is you have to get to know somebody.
Exactly.
And that was your point. As a 10-year-old can only say, wait a minute, how can you hate me if you don't even know me? But it really got me thinking a little bit about love. I've heard phrases like, if you can't love everybody, you can't love anybody, which is a bit extreme. But but
hate is a very extreme thing. I mean, we can see somebody, that we don't know and just, say, I'm not so sure I'm attracted to that person, or, that I would really care to go over there and talk to that person sitting at the bar or whatever. It doesn't mean that I hate that person.
Sure.
But when you hate somebody, you have put an emotion into something, because hate is an emotion. And so how can you invest that emotion in someone else that, that you've never even communicated with? You have no inkling anything about them. You haven't read anything about them. You just see them. You see the color of their skin, or you heard somebody tell you that person over there is Jewish. That person over there is Muslim. That person over there is gay. And all of a sudden that emotion comes out and you hate that person. That is what fascinates me.
Right. And it is fascinating. And more often than not, without sounding like I'm kind of over stroking you, it's a little bit atypical, Daryl, because what I think most people would do is repel from being interested and fascinated by that. Either turn the other way, which is by omission, or said another way, by default, accepting it, or plug into the fear, the animosity, and that negative energy.
Well, my band members were once interviewed by somebody doing a report on me. And one of my band members said, when everybody else goes right, Daryl goes left. So now
Right.
you use the word atypical. To me, it's the norm. No, I'm not looking to deviate from what everybody else is doing intentionally just to be different. I view things from a different perspective, most likely, Seth, because I've had a different background. My background has been very broad. My sphere is not just some little tiny bubble.
Sure.
It's been the whole planet. Literally, I've been around the world. I've been exposed to a multitude of religions, colors of skin, ideologies, cultures, etc. And all of that has impacted who I've become. And this started at the age of 3.
Wow.
As a child of parents in the U.S. Foreign Service. I was born in 1958. I'm 63 years old now. So we started traveling abroad, living in different countries every 2 years, starting at the age of 3. And now, as an adult professional musician, I am once again traveling around the world.
Right.
So combining my childhood travels with my adulthood travels, I've been in 57 countries on 6 continents.
Wow.
I've played in 49 of our 50 states. I'll play the 50th in November. But all of this is to say that I've been exposed to all kinds of people. And no matter how far I go from my own country, right here, the United States, whether it's right next door to Mexico or Canada or halfway around the globe, no matter how different people may be who I encounter, they may not look like me. They don't speak my language. They don't worship as I do or practice, my belief system.
Sure.
I always conclude that we all are human beings. And that has been my perspective since a child. Now, that does not make me a better person than anybody else out there. It simply gives me a broader perspective, a world view, as opposed to a neighborhood view.
Sure. And it creates a context or a framework by which then you can fill it in with being fascinated, being interested, being curious about why would they hate me, as opposed to, oh, you hate me? Well, I guess I'm going to hate you, which is very reactive and feeds the energy. But I'm going to go a little bit deeper, Daryl. I'm 54. I was born in 67, and I've been an expat for 17 years. I lived 5 years in Caracas, Venezuela. And we're doing this recording from Buenos Aires, Argentina, where I've been for 12 years. My wife is Argentine. I've also spent almost an entire year in Brazil. And I've been to, I think, last count, 41 countries. I speak 3 languages, and I consider myself, I love the dishwasher to the GM, to the CEO, to the director of the board, and everybody in between. And I don't think I'm special. I've run into a lot of people, and at first blush, you're that kind of person. But I've also met people with very, very similar experiences us, at least in pure data, that do not have that relationship with others as you're human too. Muslim, gay, Indonesian, Namibian, Canadian, Trinidadian, whatever. So what was it? What's the core virtue down there underneath just an accumulation of experiences that you tap into, that you draw from, that is the anchor there?
I think being exposed at an early age, but also realizing, through growing up, that everybody taps in and relates to, 5 core values.
Okay.
I don't care where they are in the world. Everybody wants to be loved. We all want to be respected. We want to be heard. That's very important. Listening is very important. People want to be heard. We want to be treated fairly. And we want the same things for our family as anybody else wants for their family. And the sooner we realize that and apply those values, whether it's domestically or internationally, when we find ourselves in a culture or society in which we're unfamiliar, I will guarantee that our navigation will be that much more smooth and much more positive.
Yeah, now that is something to hang your hat on. And I agree with all 5, because if you're grounded in those things, it doesn't matter, and you bring it to an interaction, a dialogue, a relationship, it doesn't matter who you're talking to. There is an empathy there that's established at kind of a baseline level. It reminds me of the Stevie Wonder song, what the world needs now is love, sweet love, right? I mean, that's...
Was that Burt Bacharach?
No, I'm sorry. Good morning, evening, friends. That one by Stevie.
Okay, gotcha. So speaking of music, living in Argentina, do you tango?
I do tango.
All right.
I will confess my appetite is about 2 or 3 songs. And I tend to go for the very classics.
La Cumbrecita, Blue Tango.
There you go. There you go. And given the time that I spend in Venezuela, which is much more Caribeño, I definitely incline towards the salsa, which for me is music that rebirths you, if you will, resuscitates you. Merengue too, but I prefer the salsa, which is just a really powerful music to dance to and connect with. But yes,
no lambada.
Lambada is, as far as a dance goes, it's very challenging. It's very challenging. Salsa is too, but lambada. There's also frevo. There's vallenato in Colombia. In Argentina, the adolescents and in the clubs, they play a music called cumbia,
right?
Which to me technically is a misnomer, because true cumbia is in Colombia, and it's more of a very dare I say, an R&B-ish Latino, almost an unplugged-y kind of slower rhythm, Whereas I think Argentine club culture just expropriated the word, and it's much more of a rap kind of reggaeton kind of cumbia down here. But
Now,
I'm a bit of a purist, Daryl. So
okay, so I assume that you do Argentinian tango as opposed to American tango, right?
oh yeah, oh
Okay.
yeah. And the Argentinian barbecue, we do the asado, and I was out of the country. I was back in the States for 2 months, and the first weekend I had, we went to the butcher and got the wood and cooked it up. You'll have to come down sometime and
Yeah.
yeah.
I'll have to send you a copy of a song, a salsa song that I wrote.
That would be great. That would be great. Well, there you go. That's one connecting point. It's not in your 5, but music. So let's use that. Connect the bridge because, look, I know the story. He comes up to you and he says, I've never heard, somebody play Jerry Lee Lewis,
A black man.
like that, a black man. And, I didn't want to quote it directly because I would kill it, which I did. Was that a turning point, the turning point, an inflection point that moved you closer to, pardon the metaphor, the fire?
It was definitely a crucial point. That kind of thing happens quite often with me, actually, because, playing country music, which was what I was doing at that particular time, and I continue to do it from time to time, is an oddity to see a black person playing that. When people think of it, they think of Charlie Pride.
I was
And of
just going to
course,
say that. Yeah.
everybody, would come to me, hey, can you sing, would you sing Kiss an Angel Good Morning or Crystal Chandelier, these Charlie Pride songs, which I know, but I refuse to do them. Not because I don't like them. I like the songs. I like Charlie Pride. I've met Charlie Pride. He's a nice person and all that kind of stuff. But I don't want them to pigeonhole me and think, okay, it's a black guy in a country band. He has to do Charlie Pride. No.
Of course.
I'll let one of the other white guys in the band sing the Charlie Pride songs, and I'll accompany him on the piano. But if I'm going to sing a country song, I'm going to freak them out. I'm going to do some Hank Williams, some Johnny Cash, something like that, which they're not expecting, and that then expands their breadth of knowledge. It opens up their eyes a little bit.
Yeah, Ray Charles did a double country album recorded live.
Did. Well, even before that,
blew their mind, right?
I'll tell you a little story about Ray Charles. Ray Charles had a top-selling album in the '60s, which was nothing but country, just himself.
Sure.
Doing Hank Williams, some Merle Haggard, all kinds of stuff, and Don Gibson. And it was a gold record.
Wow.
And then later on, what you're talking about, like back in the '80s, he did a double album with other country artists. He did a bunch of duets with George Jones and Willie Nelson and Merle Haggard, etc. And so when this thing was being produced by the legendary country music producer Owen Bradley, a young reporter, came to interview Owen Bradley. And apparently this guy was a novice because he didn't know anything about Ray Charles's background in country music. He knew Ray as a R&B, kind of player. And he said, well, to Mr. Bradley, how do you think Ray Charles is going to fit doing, country music? And Owen Bradley's response was, Ray Charles is like an elephant. He can sit wherever he wants. And that's true. That guy was a musical not jack of all trades, but master of all trades.
Yeah. Just an inspiration, and talk about breaking a mold and, doing it a little bit differently. I want to take a little bit of a turn here, and I'm gonna request your help. But Daryl, we see today on social media postings, in newspapers, magazines, on the newscasts, words like bias, partial, unconscious bias, empathy, diversity, inclusion, and equity, the LGBTQ community. And your experience speaks to all of that, because down deep, it's those 5 things, right? It's everybody wants to be loved, respect, treated fairly. Families heard. Everybody wants to be heard, and families want the same thing for their families all over the world. In today's world of Me Too, and all this surge of awareness, which is a long time coming, Black Lives Matter, voter rights, and everything, there's a big disruption in the workplace. They're calling it the Great Resignation, work from home, or not working from the office, or a little bit of both. When someone is hiring and interviewing, or the other way around, when you're looking to be hired and interviewed, can you share some of your insights into what you would recommend for first the person who's doing the hiring, doing the interviewing, given your experience from your background, from those 5 principles, but beyond your whole global experience in the context of today, what should they be bringing to the conversation, to the interview?
Okay, well, I think first of all, what they should be bringing to the interview is integrity, transparency, and the fact that they care about the person that they're going to hire. They're going to make that person feel welcome. They're going to invest in that person's future because that person is going to be building their company or their corporation or whatever it is that person is being hired for. So, you have to put that, make that person feel at ease. Now, of course, you're expecting a lot from that person.
Sure.
But what are you giving that person in return that's going to make them stay around for decades or, at least a decade?
Here's the challenge. Given the high stakes, or given the magnified focus on diversity and inclusion and equity and LGBTQ communities, coming from the experience, if you're a member, if you belong to one of those communities and you're being interviewed by somebody who doesn't, how do you overcome the mindset of, am I fulfilling a quota or a number, versus them really seeing, as you suggest, being valued, being respected, bring your integrity, bring your transparency. You know what I'm saying? Like in that moment, given who you are and what you've accomplished in this area, what can you provide?
Well, I've never really been in that position as a company boss or anything like that. I realize that situation does exist. People, feel they need to make a quota. Am I just filling in that blank, or am I hiring this person because I feel, this person can do the job? Let me put it in the context of my band, because I am a band leader and I hire musicians to perform in my band as members, or I might call them in for special gigs or whatever, because they have a specialty in what they play or sing. I don't care if someone is gay. I've had all white people in my band. I'm the only black person. I've had, all black people and one white person. I've had gay people. I've had all kinds of people. I don't care what they are, what their belief system is, as long as they can give me the support that I need when I'm fronting the band. They give me that support. They represent me. They're not, on break in the bathroom doing drugs or coming to the gig drunk or whatever. I don't care what their personal belief system is, whether it's something, that I practice or not. As long as they can play the music and they do what I need them to do and support me, I will take care of them. And they're welcome on my stage anytime. I've had, men who wear dresses, play gigs with me. It doesn't matter to me, as long as I treat them as I want to be treated.
As long as they deliver.
As long as they deliver. That's what it's about.
Right. Well, I think that's great. I mean, it just comes down to ability and capacity, and the rest is, ancillary, less important. I just think from your position, it's an interesting view, because I would call you a specialist in connecting and in empathizing and seeing people who they are, which is a skill. Because I think what's in the way, Daryl, and correct me if I'm wrong, is you had mentioned it earlier in our conversation, but there's what somebody looks like, what you might color, what you might know about them, their religion, maybe their sexual orientation, and you start layering all of these layers on top of people being really able to see truly who they are. So you have this core question, how can you hate me if you don't even know me? And it's really been kind of an anchor or a virtue by which you've, created a lot of your life and defined a lot of your experiences. Can you share with us what you would think most valuable, Daryl, for our listeners who are looking for insights that are relevant to today, where you had an aha moment, where you had a breakthrough, where, you were in a moment where, I mean, gosh, Daryl, I see you next to a burning cross and I'm like, this guy's putting his life on the line, I mean, it almost feels like, I don't want to deify you, but you're like an everyday Gandhi. The KKK member comes to your house with his bodyguard, but you're going out into the field at night with the hooded bunch of guys burning a cross. I mean, did you ever feel that your life was on the line?
Well, not only have I felt it, it actually has been a few times. But, there are other times when some people they want to be understood, even though I feel that they are wrong. They want to be understood. So in other words, they want to be heard.
Sure.
So if I'm willing to listen, they're willing to explain to me. And so that's why I will do these things. I'll go watch them, have their cross lighting or whatever, and learn why they do this, what it means to them. And then we have a discussion about it. And then we talk about other things. And then because, once you allow them to be heard, their wall comes down and they feel compelled to reciprocate. Okay, this guy gave me his ear. Now it's my turn. And they will listen to you. Now, something might not change, right then in that moment.
Sure.
But when they go home, they're by themselves, they reflect upon what transpired earlier in the day. It's like, wow, I just had a conversation with a Black man and, we didn't do this. We talked and what he said about such and such, it makes sense. Oh, but he's Black. But what he said is true. Oh, but he's Black. So they're having a cognitive dissonance, and they struggled with that for a while because, they've grown up with this thing, and all of a sudden this thing is being shattered with truth. And so they have a decision to make. Do I believe this guy because I've now found out what he is saying is true, and now I have to change my direction, or do I continue living a lie? That's their decision. And for the most part, many of them have chosen the truth that I've dealt with. There will always be some who will prefer to live the lie, and they will go to their grave being hateful, violent, and racist. There are different reasons for that. They're just hateful people, or they enjoy the power, of putting somebody else down or somebody looking up to them.
Right, but that power is so illusory and so temporal because it's, I don't know, it seems like
right, but see, if that's all they know in that little small sphere, that's what they get. Because, let me tell you a true experience that happens to me several times a year. I might, during non-pandemic, during ordinary times, right? I might give anywhere from 50 to 75, 80 lectures a year all over the country, and a lot of universities, colleges, etc. So I'll do the lecture and I'll do a Q&A. And at the end of the lecture, students will still come up to the podium to ask one last question, or they might want to touch one of the robes or hoods that I brought. But 2 or 3 out of 10 times, every 10 times, there will be a student standing in the back, off in the distance. And they're not doing anything. They're just kind of like milling around, And I've come to realize what's up. When the crowd leaves my podium and I'm packing up by myself, that student will come down and they'll look around, make sure nobody's within earshot, oh, Mr. Davis, I enjoyed your lecture, and I thank them, shake their hand. Then they look around some more and they say, my mother is in the Klan. Or my father's a neo-Nazi. And that's how I was raised. I was raised that way, and now I'm here at University of fill in the blank. And my boyfriend is Jewish, or my girlfriend is Black, or my best friend's a Muslim, and I can't take my friend home. My parents will kill me or they'll disown me. And I don't want to tell my friend because they'll drop me. So they got this secret that's burning on their chest, causing an ulcer. And they have to get it out. Yeah. And I'm the best person for them to come and talk to because, they come from that small bubble, that environment where everybody is homogenous. They all go to the same high school. They cheer the same sports team. They shop at the same grocery store, swim in the same community swimming pool, vote for the same candidate. So everything's pretty much the same. And then when they come away to college or university, that high school or that neighborhood does not come with them. And at that university, there are neighborhoods and high schools from all over the country and all over the world there. And now they're being exposed to things they've never seen in their lives. They're beginning to realize Jewish people don't have horns, Black people don't have tails, and they know this to be true. So now they're faced with, how do I go home and tell my best friends from school, from high school, or my parents that this is not true? Right. It's a problem.
And that happens
2 or 3 out of every 10 times I give a lecture at a university. Yes.
Wow. I've when you speak, you often share that when you have, especially in the beginning, when you visited with, is it Mr. Kelly from the KKK? Mm-hmm. You had said, I don't agree with almost everything that he says, which leaves the door open for might be some things that you agree with. What would be some of those?
Okay. Well, do you agree that we need better education for kids?
100%.
You believe that we need to do more about drugs being sold on street corners and stuff?
The sooner the better.
Okay, well, so does he. So now you got something in common with somebody from the KKK. Now, of course, not all KKK people agree with that, but he did, and he's former KKK now. He's no longer in the KKK. But yeah, he was very adamant about that. So what we do is, listen, you start, this far apart on opposite ends of the spectrum. And rather than go right for our differences, look for things that we might have in common. Education. We want better education for our kids. You want better education for your kids. He wants better education for his kids. That narrows the gap a little bit. So you can find that out within 5 minutes. And then speak another 5 minutes, you're finding more that you have in common. Here, you're at opposite ends, you're enemies. Here, you're forming a relationship. Speak another 5 minutes, you found more in common. Now you're heading towards a friendship. So now you're thinking, well, what can we do together to make these things happen faster? And the more you find you have in common, the less and less things matter that you have in contrast, especially trivial things such as skin color or whether you go to a church, a synagogue, a mosque, or a temple.
No, that's great. I mean, one of the things that I took away from your conversation with Bo was, it may have been him, but it could have been you. Conflict is the setup to win, but not to learn.
I think he might have said that, yes.
Yeah.
But I agree.
So conflict is the setup to win, but not to learn. And when you're in conflict, it's all about who's right and who's wrong.
Yes.
Who's dominating and who's going to be dominated. So
when somebody is setting up for conflict, I'm learning from their conflict because they are conflicted, not me. They want to conflict with me, but they're the ones who are conflicted.
Have you ever had that?
Learn where they're coming from, and
have you ever had that moment where they've been so voracious and so hateful that you want to plug in and go tit for tat, or are you?
I've had to do that. I mean, I've had to physically engage upon occasion.
Right.
Fortunately, I prevailed. Both on the street and in court. But those times have been few and far between, fortunately.
Right.
But understand, you are going into a situation where it's not just some run-of-the-mill racist who doesn't want you dating his daughter or something. It's somebody who will go so far as to join an organization that has a history of blowing up churches, dragging people behind pickup trucks, hanging people by the neck from trees, murdering people, castrating people, a whole litany of now 156-year history. The Klan was born in 1865, so it's 156 years old. So somebody who would make the effort to join such an organization with such a strong history and beliefs, there are people within them that will not talk to you. As soon as they see you, they're on you. They don't want to hear a word you have to say. You are a cockroach crawling across the floor. They're going to go over there and just stomp on you.
Yeah, it's, earlier before we recorded, I had shared with you, where I had moved from on the East Coast to the West, somewhat sheltered in a mostly Jewish environment and, really nice suburb. And I had played competitive junior tennis. And we had gone to another state where there were a lot of Mormons. And at that age, 15, 16, you do homestays. So they have a big regional tournament and you stay at, Daryl Davis's house because your son or daughter might be playing tennis in the tournament, or you might be a member of the club or in the neighborhood. And when, I don't know how it came out that I was Jewish, but they had asked me with a very, very straight face to see my horns. And I was in the Jewish faith. I'm like conservative reformed. So I grew up in a kosher home. I was bar mitzvahed. I have a very strong, my wife is Jewish. My kids are Jewish. I have a very strong historical, cultural relationship. I'm less religiously observant in practice, but I knew enough that I was taught that Michelangelo's interpretation of Moses, when he did the sculpture, the scripture that he had done the sculpture based off of, talked about two shining lights coming out of his head. And the way that he interpreted it in the sculpture was these lights and looked like horns. And from then on, Jews had horns, right? And I was like, I came home to my mother, my single mother, and I was just blown away, like so naive. I still didn't want to believe that they believed that. You know what I mean? Like like even today, I say it in Spanish, me cuesta. Like it's hard to believe, you know? Can you relate to that?
Yeah, 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 yeah. And believe it or not, that was back when you were a kid.
Yeah.
Okay, but you know what? There are people who still believe that today.
That
That's
was
the
like
unfortunate thing.
1981.
Yeah, well, that's 40 years ago.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
there's still people who believe that today, unfortunately, and that's due. Well, it's ignorance. It's what it is. All right, and it's due to the lack of exposure and education. Let me. You mentioned kosher. Let me give you my kosher story.
Sure.
When I was a kid, I was like I think 13 or 14, and in the eighth grade, and I had to pick a science experiment, and the one that I chose used dry ice.
Okay.
So I needed a small chunk of dry ice for my experiment, and somebody told me that I could probably get it at a delicatessen or something. So I went through the yellow pages and began calling these places. And I found one. It's actually a famous delicatessen right over the DC line. I live in Maryland, and right about 15 minutes from DC. So I asked, the guy said he had dry ice. And so I asked my father to drive me down there to get a piece. So he took me down there, and he sat in the car, and he said, how much is it? I said, I don't know. And so he gave me a $20 bill. So I go inside this delicatessen, and I asked the guy for some dry ice. He says, how much do you need? I said, well, I don't know. I need a piece about, that big. So he brings up this dry ice wrapped in brown paper, and he opens it up, big log. He like hacks off a piece, like that. I said, yeah. And he, says, oh, give me $5. So I gave him the 20. And so now I had a bunch of change, I had like $15 left, right? And so I saw the stuff in the glass counter. I'm hungry, so I'm gonna go ahead and buy myself a sandwich. And so I said, let me have a ham and cheese sandwich. He goes, no, can't do it. This is a kosher place. Now I'd heard the word kosher a million times, but to me, kosher meant okay. That's
Right.
cool. It's kosher, right? So,
Right.
and he said, this is cool. He said, I can't. It's a kosher place, and I said, okay. I saw some other meat, like bologna or something, salami. I said, salami and cheese. This is a kosher place. Can't do. I said, well, if it's kosher, what's the problem, man? And he yelled at me, get the hell out of here.
Mm.
And so I left completely baffled.
Right.
Why this man would not make me a sandwich. I had the money, and he's yelling it's kosher, meaning it's cool. But he won't make me a sandwich and tells me to get the hell out. So of course it wasn't until later that I learned the true definition of kosher.
Sure.
But fortunately for me, I did not take it out on him, in my mind.
Right.
Like, what's wrong with these Jewish
Right.
people, something like that. Because
Right.
obviously he should realize, A, I'm not Jewish, otherwise I would have known, right? And B, that I was ignorant to what I was asking for, to their religious policy or whatever. That would have been his opportunity to alleviate my ignorance by educating me, by explaining to me, hey, listen, kosher means this, we don't do this, we don't do that. However, I can sell you the meat and I can sell you the cheese, and what you do with it is your own business.
Right.
But otherwise, he enabled my ignorance and made me angry, and that anger could have turned into anti-Semitism. For me, it was not. But for others, I've seen that kind of thing happen.
Oh, yeah. And how many times, Daryl, do people take a sample size of one?
Exactly.
And then an entire religion, race, whatever is
police department, whatever,
is stamped out forever, Oh, people do it with products, you get a shoe company, they make 25 million pairs of shoes a year. You get one defective pair and I'm never gonna, ever, which is, it's their choice, but it's, that's where, when you talk about your 5, it's be fair, right? Fairness.
Yeah.
And that's important. There was one other phrase that I got out of the Bo conversation that I really, really spoke to me. And I think that this has to do with the kosher story. We live in uncertain times. There are things that are always going to be uncertain. We can't predict the future. As humans, we like to predict and plan and work on past experience. But when it comes to relationships, and then when it comes to conflict, or when there's a lack of empathy, agreement, and understanding in relationships, it seems to me that the core virtue or the core kind of place that you come from is seek to understand, not to convince.
And why that is more effective is this, because if you can understand why they are behaving in this manner or why they have this set of beliefs, then you can figure out how best to address those beliefs and allow them to convince themselves that they are wrong and they need to choose a different perspective. Because nothing is stronger and will be more tenacious or have the tenacity than if somebody does it themselves rather than you force them to do it. If you try to compel somebody to do something, you may succeed, in the short term, but they're not going to like it, and eventually they're going to move on.
Right.
But if they decide themselves, this is what is best for me, it's going to last a lot longer. Just like I'm sure your father told you, just like mine told me, or whatever. Rather than give you something. If you earn it and you go out and buy it yourself, you're going to treat it a lot better, right?
For sure.
That kind of thing. It's going to last a lot longer. Because here's the thing. You can convince people of certain things and they get it. But depending upon how ingrained that thing is, understand that one's perception is one's reality. Even if their reality is not real, it is their reality. And to them, it is real. And you are not going to change somebody's reality if it's that deeply ingrained. All right, because their perception is their reality. So the more you attack their reality, the more defensive they're going to be about it. What you want to do, rather than convince them that they're wrong, is offer them a better perception. And if they resonate with your perception, they in turn will change their own reality because their perception is their reality.
Right.
So you cannot offer them a better perception until you first seek to understand why and how they arrived at that. So give you a hypothetical. Let's say that you have a 7 or 8-year-old brother, and he has gone to a magic show with his friend and his friend's parents. And he comes home and says, Seth, you're not going to believe what I saw. This magician, he was on stage and he asked for a female volunteer, and 50 women raised their hand, and he picked out one and brought her up on stage and told her to climb into this box and stick her feet out the hole in that end and stick her head out the hole in this end. And then he closed the lid and he took a chainsaw and went right through the middle of the box. He cut her in half. And you're like, no, that didn't really happen. Yes, it did. I saw it. I saw it with my own eyes. You weren't there. I saw it. The saw went right through the wood, right through the bottom, and she was in the box. You're not going to tell him anything different. He knows what he saw.
Right.
His perception is that man cut that woman in half. That's a reality to him. And then to make it even more real, he tells you the magician then took the half with the feet sticking out and moved it over here to stage left, and the half with the head over here to stage right. And then he walked over there and talked to the head, and the head talked back. And then he brought the two halves back together, did some incantation, and opened the lid, and out pops the woman, full form, no blood, right?
And that's their reality.
That's their reality. And there's nothing you can tell him that he did not see that man cut that woman in half. Yeah. So rather than attack his reality and get him all defensive and ready to fight you because you're calling him a liar, basically, offer him a better perception.
Yeah.
You might say, I hear what you're saying. Hey, that's pretty cool. But is it possible that just maybe when he asked for a volunteer to come out of the audience, a female, the woman that he chose, maybe she works for him. Maybe he had planted her in that seat in the audience. She knows the trick, and she travels to every show with him. And when she climbs into the box, there's already a pair of mannequin legs lying on the floor of the box that are wearing the same stockings and same shoes that she has on. She picks them up and sticks them out the hole. And she brings her own knees and legs up under her chest. So her whole body is on that side of the box. So when he passes the saw through the box, her whole body is already over there.
That's
and then
right.
he separates them. So then when he brings it back together, she pulls those legs out, leaves them on the floor, and she climbs up. And so your brother says, yeah, I guess that would be the only way that could work.
Yeah, maybe.
So you've given him a better perception, and now he has changed his own reality.
Right.
So did you convince him? Indirectly, yes. But you offered him something to think about, and he arrived at that conclusion, and he convinced himself that he was wrong, that this is a far better viable option than somebody cutting this woman in half and gluing her back together or something.
Right. It's planting the seed. I mean, what's the phrase? That which you resist persists, or like you said, you can convince them or coerce or even manipulate or, dare I say, force, but it's very short term. The power really is what the method that you were talking about: offer a different reality, stand firm.
Offer different perceptions.
Stand firm in that offering, be clear, have it be clean, and offer it as an invitation.
Right.
Yeah.
As a possibility.
I mean, as a possibility. You're kind of like a relatedness alchemist or a doctorate in getting related, because at the end of the day, my business, is selling speakers. But there's a lot to that. I have to get connected, be related. I have to inform. And then I offer the perspective as to why Daryl might be a fit or would be a great fit from my view. But it required, to get to that conversation of considering the possibility of Daryl as a speaker, I have to establish a relationship. I have to establish relatedness. I have to get in their world and know that they have this committee or this kind of boss, or they're new, or they've been there a long time, or what's the mood of the industry, et cetera, et cetera. And that requires paying attention. And what I'm left with talking with you for nearly an hour is that it's so in your DNA and so in your cellular makeup that you might not even be aware of how natural it is for you. So I'm just, I'm moved by that. Inspired, and that's a big takeaway for me.
Well, you're doing exactly that. You're listening. You're playing the role basically of a psychologist. You're finding out this person. I'm on the couch, and you're finding out what my background is. How did I arrive at this? And then with that information, you determine where best I would fit and what I should do to enable this and that, or what client to match me with, etc. And and that comes from exactly what you said. Seeking to understand. And I'll say this. And you can probably say this too. With your travels to 47 countries. If I had not had that childhood that I had traveling all over the place, would I be doing this today? Maybe not. Maybe I would be staying as far away from those people as I could. Because my experiences, might be different. Because I'll tell you something. And this is sort of unfortunate. Back in the 40s and 50s, before we were born, shortly before we were born, a lot of Black people, Black Americans in this country moved to France.
Yes.
And many of them gave up their American citizenship.
Quincy Jones,
Josephine Baker, Eartha Kitt, a lot of people, because they were being treated as equals by the French people, where their own fellow Americans were treating them like second and third class citizens.
That's
right. And so now those French people over there look just like white Americans. They were the same color. In fact, the French were probably even more white than white Americans.
Sure.
Right. Because they didn't have the influx of Native Americans and slaves and miscegenation and all that kind of stuff. Right. And they were over there to be treated equal. And that's what they got. But unfortunately, over here, when people are treated badly, or they have a perception, is some Black people think all white people are that way, are the same as white Americans, because they've experienced racism. They don't want anything to do with French people, Danish or Swedish. It's the color of the skin that makes them bad. And same thing with white racists. They see Black people, Black Americans, the same as they see Africans or East Indians or Trinidadians, Jamaicans, etc. Everybody it's not the color of the skin that makes somebody. It's, as Martin Luther King put it, it's not the color of the skin, but the content of the character. And
Right.
because we've had that experience traveling so much and seeing that, like the kids who threw rocks at me when I was in the Cub Scout parade that you alluded to earlier in the conversation in Massachusetts, had that been my first experience with white people, would I still be on this quest today? Or would I have judged all white people that way? But because I'd been around white people from all over the world, even fellow Americans who did not behave like that, I knew they were the outliers. So I had to find out what makes them tick and not paint the whole, I don't want to say race, because race is a man-made construct, you know what I'm saying? Paint the
Yes.
whole white race as being people like that. As you pointed out, one incident out of 25 million shoes makes the whole shoe company bad.
Right. Yeah, no, it's great. We've come to the end here. I could go on and on. I appreciate your generosity. I think we got a lot of great stuff. Before I end record, I just want to ask you one last thing. I spent a lot of time in New England. How long did you stay in Belmont?
I was there less than a year. Normally, you get assigned to a country for 2 years. And at the end of your 2-year assignment, you come back to the States, you're here for a few months, like perhaps during the summer. So that way you leave, and your kid can go to start school at the right time in the fall overseas. Or, you might request to stay here for a year. My father requested to stay here for a year. He wanted to finish up his master's degree at BU, Boston University. Yeah. So when we came back, we lived in Boston for about 3 weeks. And the school system was so bad. Let me tell you something. I'm not joking. I was in the 4th grade, and kids, I'm not joking, Seth, this is sad. Kids were still learning their ABCs in the 4th grade.
Yeah.
And I thought that was funny because I knew my ABCs in kindergarten.
Right.
And when I came home and told my parents, they didn't think it was funny. I thought they'd laugh. They're like, we're out of here. And we packed up and moved to the suburbs of Belmont, Massachusetts.
Right. In Belmont Hill, I think, is a school there.
I went to Payson Park Elementary.
Okay.
And it burned down a few years ago, but the park is still there.
Yeah.
But and that was the first place I was called a nigger.
Wow.
Yeah.
At that elementary school, but not in Boston.
Not in Boston. I saw a lot of stuff in Boston.
Right.
I saw a white teacher grab a black kid and beat the daylights out of him.
Wow.
And there was a lot of violence and stuff. I was there when Martin Luther King was assassinated, and I remember Boston burned to the ground. We had just moved to Belmont, and Boston burned to the ground. And we went back to Boston to get some friends of mine from my school there in Boston and bring them out to Belmont so they wouldn't be, endangered in the rioting and stuff. Yeah.
Amazing. Small world. Yeah. Longwood. I played tennis at the Longwood Tennis Club, but if you were there that young, you may not, it's all near Belmont and everything. Well, listen, I can't thank you enough for your generosity. If you'd like to learn more about this speaker, visit our website at thekeynotecurators.com. There you'll find dozens of videos of speakers that are a perfect fit for your event. My name is Seth Dechtman, and you've been watching Curated Insights.